Welcome to the Social Media Church podcast. I'm Nils Smith, and I'm joined by Aaron Magnuson, my co-host. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here as a human. And if you haven't listened to our last episode, this podcast is being done by humans for humans.
Yes.
And our last one was also done by humans for humans. Last episode was all about ChatGPT. You got to listen to it if you missed it. And we want to hear all your thoughts on it as well. So I'm happy to be here as a human, where this is unscripted because we didn't ask ChatGPT to tell us about Yelp and how churches can use Yelp, but in a way, Nils, this is very unscripted podcasting. We're not on a track. We're thinking for ourselves. We're human.
And we'll keep it that way until we don't. So no promises as to where it's going.
Unless my AI self looks way better, then I'll punt. Then we can have AI version of Aaron. But I like the human version of Nils. I have a hard time thinking that you're going to look any better. That AI, like if I said, give me the perfect version of Nils Smith. No, I don't think so. I trust you a little bit more that you're bald. If you had hair, I don't know that I'd trust you to be my social media.
I would sacrifice trust for hair. That's every bald man will understand my pain there.
I'm balding on the top of my head. Yeah, it's kind of a thing. My wife told me that I look in my mid to late 30s. And so I was like, man, maybe it's just because of my size and people can't tell on here, but I'm tall when you meet me in person. But I don't know. I told her she looked like she's still in her 20s. So
yeah, it's true. It's true. So let's talk about the topic of today, and that is Yelp. And now I would say though the topic is reviews. And this is something that I think churches don't pay a lot of attention to, but I think actually affects your church more than you think. And so, here in New York City, people often ask me, like, how do you find good restaurants? Where do you go? And I'm like, trust Yelp. Yelp is a great platform to find good food, but it's actually a great platform. I think we use it for coffee shops and restaurants and some of those things, but it's also a good platform to find just about anything.
Yep.
Google reviews is really probably even more broad than that. And before I go to a restaurant, I am checking their Yelp reviews of, are they good or bad, because they're trustworthy.
Nils, we got to camp out here for a second, because you're not the only one who said this. My good friend Ben Lounsbury, we'll give Ben a shout out. Ben described Yelp in the exact same way, and I think it's naturally integrated to Apple devices.
Yes.
And how that functions. I did not really use Yelp on my Android device back when I was doing that. And so he was saying the exact same thing. He said, I don't go somewhere unless I've Yelped it. Like essentially, so he kind of took it a step further than you, where even if everybody's recommending this, I'm checking Yelp to see. And he's like, I can tell on Yelp, this and that, very, very similar to what you're talking about. But how has Yelp because Amazon reviews, crazy. You can't trust nothing. Like most places now, it's so overpopulated. Aaron personally does not really trust reviews, but on Yelp, people are still basing their decisions off of, I can just tell by the pictures and the combination of the reviews. Like, so what did Yelp do, Nils, to keep that so reliable and unlike these other platforms like a Google review, even like a Facebook review or an Amazon review? What sets Yelp apart? Because I think that's going to help our church leaders understand this is why maybe we should invest. If we're going to start somewhere with reviews and maybe even asking our congregants to review us, this is probably why we need to start with Yelp.
Well, and I bring up Yelp because honestly, I have a client who had a really bad Yelp review, and they were like, what do we do about it? Like, we can't delete it. And I'm like, yeah, you can't delete it. That's part of why Yelp is people can leave bad reviews and you can't do anything about it. And people are talking about you online. And I think too, it's better to not wait until you get a bad review, because that's what then shows up first and most significantly to really pay attention to these platforms. And so I would though challenge with Amazon, like I check Amazon reviews and I know a lot of them are fake. I actually get paid, or get given free things to leave reviews on Amazon. So I get how people play the game, but I think people play the game because it matters. And I think we don't necessarily need to play the game, but I think we need to understand it does matter. And so I think getting reviews, positive reviews, where you can encourage it, just like every restaurant often saying, "Hey, can you go leave us a review on Google reviews? Or can you go leave us a review on Yelp?"
Totally.
Because it matters, and I think too, it also matters for searches, especially Google reviews. So I think practically, and doesn't need to be a long podcast. I think though, it's should people pay attention to reviews? And I think the answer is yes. And then it's like, so if you're doing that, how should you manage it? And so I think my advice, and Aaron, I'm curious your advice, is basically start by just asking people to leave a review. And maybe start with your staff, start with your volunteers, but ask for honest reviews of leave a review about how this church you know, uh, has impacted your family. And I think you'll be surprised how much people are checking out as much as they can before they go to your church. And reviews are going to be one of those platforms, maybe not for everybody, but for a significant number. So I think it will go a long way if you can just get a base of reviews on Google reviews and on Yelp, those two platforms in particular, about your church.
Yeah. I didn't, when you posed this topic, Nils, is something that we should talk about. It's not something we naturally think about as churches and church leaders, unless there's something bad. And
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, I got a bad review. We got to correct this. And we have such an aversion to people's opinions and
Yes.
thinking that that's going to well, now everyone's going to leave because they had this one opinion or they're speaking untruthfully. And so I'm glad you suggested to do this episode, because I do think it's important. And I think what I would advise our church leaders to think about is, based off of what you just said, Nils, Yelp is valuable because the bad reviews stay.
Yes.
And so as we're entering a world, and particularly reaching a generation, there's two thoughts I have on this. Reaching a generation where search is everything, and there is such a blend between fake and artificial and real, that bad reviews, I'm going to go on a little tangent here. That bad reviews are actually going to bring more value to your church. So I think the first thing is we should be adamant about people's honest feedback about our church.
Yeah.
Because the good reviews are going to shine a lot brighter and hold more weight, especially if there's more of them. Because there are 1 stars. And because there are, this church did not, blah, 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 terrible people, terrible pastor, all of these things. And then that review is sitting right next to another review of, I was about to take my own life, and I heard this message from pastor so-and-so. And then I came here, got plugged into a community. My whole life changed. And then a young person is going to have to make a decision. By the way, how they do for every other decision, these tacos were terrible. But were they terrible, or did you order the wrong thing? Did you have bad expectations? Were they really bad? Was it really that bad? Because everybody else is saying this is the best tacos they've ever had. Service is awesome. Or maybe, okay, I'm cool with bad tacos, but the vibes here look awesome, because there's pictures on Yelp too, right? So there's validity that's brought to seeing bad reviews versus like everything being really polished. And I think the irony of churches, and having worked in a couple churches myself, is that we preach you don't have to be perfect to come here, yet we want to be the most polished thing on the outside, And I get it, right? For most reasons, it's because we love and respect and want to represent the perfect God of the universe, right? I totally get that. And so there are good motivations for why we want to come across the right way. But this younger generation just wants the real. Right. And so when you're going to Yelp and you see this cocktail of both types of reviews,
Yeah.
but probably I would imagine because people show up to your church every week,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly it's going to be positive reviews and positive testimonies about how lives have been changed. People are going to want to check that out.
Yeah.
What holds hands with that, and this is kind of my second reason that you should be doing this is how the younger generation is finding everything, not just restaurants, everything. They need some way to test it before they see it. And they're not just doing that through your YouTube service. They're not just doing that through what you're posting online, listening to a podcast. They are doing that too. But then they probably want to be able to see, like, gosh, what are people on Yelp saying about this? Or what are the reviews for this church? And so you're actually inserting yourself, as we're trying to reach the next generation, right? Which every leader in every church is. You're putting yourself in the stream of how they're evaluating what they're going to participate in. You're entering yourself into the conversation. And so I think that too is really important. The last kind of side tangent thing that ties more to point number one that I was going to say, every pastor is going to understand this. One of the backings of the validity of the Bible is that not every account in the Bible, from, let's just talk about the four gospels, was told the same way or had the same details. And in some parts it seems contradictory.
Yeah.
And why should we be so prideful to think that the reviews on our account need to all sound, look, taste, and be the same? That doesn't communicate authenticity. We're people. There's people who are going to be hurt by our church. There's also lives that are going to be changed by our church. And when we embrace that, we create a great opportunity to highlight the work that God is doing. And it's probably going to be really attractive to somebody who's like, you know what, this is the church for me. Because the reality is, if somebody cares about the music that much, you don't want them there anyways. So let's have somebody talk about how terrible the music was because you had a guitar on stage, or you had, you sang this song. You would want somebody to rule themselves out before you go through the heartache of, like, I give a lot of money to this church, you need to change, blah, blah. And it's like, you don't want that headache in your life anyways. So the bad reviews are actually helping you weed out people that would be better suited to go find the other church down the street, which, by the way, you would want them to go to. So that was kind of my soapbox, Nils, but I'm really glad we're having this episode, because I don't think it's talked about nearly enough that, like, reviews matter, and don't be scared of the negative reviews.
I think that's 100% right. I love that, to see the negative reviews as positive, to help people know of, like, hey, that a lot of times you can hear that negative perspective, and it's like, oh, I actually resonate with the other side of
That's right.
of that. And so yeah, I think I think whether you're affirming or not affirming, somebody's not going to like you. Whether you're, Calvinist or not Calvinist, somebody's not going to like it. Your music's too loud or not loud enough. Somebody's not going to like it. The lights are too low, So at the end of the day, it is. I mean, I think you want people to leave reviews, good and bad. And I think this is where, look, the takeaway from today's podcast is this might be one of the most practical, podcasts we've ever done, of go and first read the reviews that people have written about you, because
That's
it's
true
likely
too.
if they're not talking about you, you're probably not doing very much. And so you want people talking about you, and hopefully people have left some reviews. The second thing I think you can do on both Google reviews and Yelp is you can upload pictures, and you can just make sure the information on there is right. And so just like restaurants can upload their menu and do things, you can do that. You can't delete any of the reviews you don't like, but you can basically, there's an aspect of ownership that you can make sure that the right information about your church is there. And then the third thing I think you can do is to encourage people to leave a review about your church.
Yes.
And so text.
I want to start seeing those Yelp stickers in the windows of
a church.
The church when people are walking in, right? So synonymous with restaurants, but like, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and it seems silly, but I think it's an interesting idea of literally do a little campaign where in the announcements, you even just say, hey guys, we are really trying to reach new people. One of the ways we can do that is through Google reviews. So if you would, even while you're in church right now, get your phones out and leave a review on Google reviews about this church. Or as you go home today, let's see if we can drive up those reviews, which is going to drive up Google search results, which is going to bring more people to our church. It's a pretty simple call to action and how people can share their feelings about their church that they, most likely deeply love with, Google reviews and with Yelp. So I think that's it. I think it's basically listen, optimize, and encourage reviews. And I think you're going to see a good return on Yelp and Google reviews. This isn't a platform you're going to build community and do all of this and have a very fruitful ministry, but I think it's part of your church's front door. And I think it's just continuing to use these, tools that are on the internet, and do what you can to optimize them to accomplish your goals. And so I hope this, being one of the simplest and most practical podcasts, is helpful to the church leaders listening to it. Aaron, any final thoughts about this conversation before we wrap it up?
Yeah, this isn't, you kind of alluded to it earlier that you had that we have a client that asked us to take the Yelp review down.
Yeah.
Nils, as the Amplify team that produces this podcast, if a church leader is trying to figure out Yelp, maybe they're trying to figure out their social media strategy, all of these things that our team can help them with. Is Yelp included in that package? Do we set up Yelp pages and help with reviews and all of the SEO side of stuff?
We do. I mean, I think at the end of the day, whatever you need help with, our team is there to help. And I think that it is one of the things that we've done is we've set up basically their Google, their Google presence, and making sure you have that optimized and good pictures and updated information in your Google, Google My Business, I think is what it's called, and your Yelp platform. So Amplify is here to help your church, your ministry, or even if you have some, businesses, within your church that people need help with. That's why Amplify exists. You can do this yourself. I want to be very clear about this.
That's true.
There are things that's like, hey, this is where we really can help. And if you need help with this, we can help. This is probably, though, the easiest thing you should do. You shouldn't use us for that, but we can. And I think it's, Aaron, to your point of like, look, we are here to come alongside you at Amplify Social Media, but we also want to give you all the tools, all the knowledge, all the understanding to be able to do it yourself. You also, though, lack time and capacity. You can't do everything that you want to do or that we talk about doing here.
I can mow my lawn, but sometimes it's nice to have somebody else mow my lawn.
100%. And it buys your time back to do the things that only you can do. And there are things that we can do more efficiently for you. So yeah, all that said, I think action items for this podcast are clear. Go and do it. But if you need help, not just with this, but with your social media for your church, Amplify Social Media is here. They're who, run this podcast for us. They're the sponsor of this podcast. And we love helping churches run their social media and reach more people through social media to accomplish their goals. So go to Amplify Social Media, amplifysocial.media to learn more about Amplify, and go to socialmedia.church to learn more about this podcast, to see the show notes, to basically get all the information, listen to other podcast episodes. But we're so grateful that you've listened. You know what? This episode was about reviews. So if you would go and leave a review for this podcast, because similar to Yelp and Google reviews, reviews in Apple Podcast help a lot. Reviews in Spotify help a lot. Reviews, I just saw on Twitter this week, one of our Stitcher listeners highlight that, and grateful that we're on Stitcher. Go to Stitcher, leave a review in Stitcher for this podcast. That helps. We read all of those reviews. So it actually helps provide great feedback to us, but it also helps others find out whether this is a good podcast for them to listen to or not, because that could be helpful. We don't want somebody listening to this podcast that this is going to be irrelevant for or to. So go and leave a review. That would mean the world to us.
Yep.
And so grateful. And go and get reviews
Yes.
for your church. That's your action item. Go and do it. And I think you're going to see fruits from it. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again on the next episode.